fist bump, give them a fist bump, say this is going to be the best session. Look at your other neighbor and say, it's because it's the last session. You guys got really excited about that. I see how this is going. All right. So, welcome everybody. Thank you. Again, thank you to David for having such a wonderful event. Everything's been first class. It's been incredible. So, I really love the theme of this, focus on the future, PM roles evolve. Because I went from being a traditional project manager, now I'm an Agile transformation coach. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So, when I talk about my journey through these two waterfall worlds, what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on 4 things. Look at your neighbor, say 4. Okay. 4, right. 4 things, no more, no less, right. 4 things that I've really learned over these last couple of years and that I've learned through my journeys. And hopefully, if you guys focus on these 4 things, you can avoid a lot of the mistakes and pitfalls I made. All right? Now, I've handed out my card. How many people did I give cards to? Most everybody, a couple people I didn't. First thing, many of you, when you took the card, you looked at it, you're like, wow, that's a lot of letters after the name. All right, so just want to go over that real quick. Part of the reason I have these letters is because my last name wasn't difficult enough, so I wanted to put a few more after there. So this is just a brief explanation of some of the certs I had, okay? One I just got that I'm really excited about. I just came from the John Maxwell Conference, and now I am a certified leadership coach, trainer, speaker, and DISC behavior analysis trainer. So if you don't know what's wrong with your spouse, please give me a call and we can talk about, no, I'm just kidding, don't do that. But I am a behavior analysis trainer. And in addition, I'm also am a martial artist, did some things in football. I know I don't look like it, but I used to be a personal trainer. Just really enjoy things. These are my hobbies. I enjoy doing some of this stuff. And then when I'm not doing all of that, here's my lovely wife. And this is my foster child, Ethan. And this is our godson who stays with us quite a bit. His name's Princeton. And of course, that's my lovely wife, Angela. Okay, so, and here are me and the boys. By the way, lesson learned, I started teaching them karate at age 3. They started practicing it on each other. My wife was like, they're punching each other. I'm like, I know, isn't that great? Oh, I'm sorry. Boys, stop. Right? And when they started tackling each other and started pinning each other on the ground, after me being very proud, I would say, okay, break it up, break it up. So, at any rate, all right, so we're going to talk about my Agile journey through 2 waterfall worlds. Here's the thing. My journey is still continuing. Okay? Even though I travel all over the country, even though I work with a lot of companies and things like that, I am still learning. We're always in a position of learning. One of the things I've learned about people who are involved with Agile, they tend to be very passionate about what they do. And it's about always progressing, always going. And here's the thing, I tell executives this, I tell people this all the time. When we're talking about Agile transformation, normally, when we think of Agile, we're thinking at the team level, and we're thinking of like Agile development. We just came from the session out there, and we talked about, a lot of times we do Agile for implementation, and we think of that at the team level. What I like to tell people is that the transformation of an organization itself is iterative. Okay? So just because you put all kind of modalities, just because you put all kind of frameworks in place, you don't call people project managers, you call them scrum masters, product owners, whatever it is, and just because you're counting story points instead of duration or whatever it is, that doesn't necessarily mean you're Agile. It's about the mindset and it's about the organizational culture. Okay? And that part is iterative and that part takes time. Everyone thinks Agile means fast, but that doesn't mean you can become Agile right away. It's not like you just turn on a light switch. Okay? So, I'm going to give you a little bit of my background. I used to work, and I'm just going to call it Big Humongous Company 1. All right, I worked at a very big company. It was a Fortune 100 company, about 100,000 people. I want to say about 50 billion, somewhere in there. And we were under some government regulations, and it was a manufacturing company. So I got a job as a project manager, and lo and behold, I'm in this job. And my first job is we have these major government regulations we have to hit. Anyone ever have to deal with government regulations? Yeah, how fun are those? Not fun? Right. Okay. So mine wasn't either. It was very tough. It was very stressful. And we were under a lot of pressure because, as I mentioned, this is a multi-billion-dollar company. And if you don't hit the regulations, what happens if you don't hit government regulations? You're out of business. right? So you can imagine the pressure, right? So I'm a very interactive person, so everyone stand up. Stand up, gotta move out. Make sure you got a little bit of room. Okay, so on this side, this is what I picture, or this is how my life was in my formative years as a project manager. Okay, this side, I want you guys to give me air quotes and say lock requirements.
Lock requirements.
Okay, act like you are like halfway inspired to be here. All right, say lock requirements.
Lock requirements.
Okay, over here, go like this with the fist. Hit the dates.
Hit the dates.
Lock requirements.
Hit the dates.
The louder.
Lock requirements.
Hit the dates.
Lock requirements.
Hit the
All
dates.
right, thank you. Great, give yourselves a round of applause, please. So that was my job, right? If we locked down our requirements, right? This is, I mean, I lived this thing, right? I mean, I had thousands of these things in my head. When I would go to sleep, I wouldn't have little sheep. I would have little Gantt charts floating through my head, right? Here's our standard gates, right? You got to meet these gates. You got to have 8,000 PowerPoint slides, and then hopefully you get your requirements, and then you freeze your design. You hit a gateway, you test, you know, et cetera, gather, okay. All this, we all know what this looks like, right? So here's my question. What happens if you're testing something and you realize something doesn't work? Not a trick question. What's that? You got to go back to build, right? Or maybe even before that, right? Even before design, right? Okay, so if you go before design, okay, now what does that do to your timeline? What's that? You push it out, or what else do we do? If we don't want to push it out, what else do we do? More resources, right? Or what else?
Scope down.
Scope it down, right? And how is management blood pressure when this stuff starts happening?
High.
Yeah, very high, right? Very high. Okay, so the amazing thing is, even though I was working in this waterfall world, and even though I was in this heavy manufacturing, everything was phase gate, our thing was, okay, if we find something in test, what we need to do is, we need to go back here, but we don't want to miss our date. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to our customers and we're going to tell them to lock down the requirements even earlier, right? We had to get to the point where we were asking our customers to lock down requirements 18 to 24 months ahead of time, okay? Before delivery. You guys can come in and grab a seat. Feel free. You got to share that brownie with everyone?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so at any rate, so we were trying to ask them to lock down requirements 18 to 24 months ahead of time. What do you think our customers said? They'll change? Our customers kept telling, and again, this is a manufacturing company, this is heavy waterfall world. They kept saying, we don't even know what the market's going to be like in 18 to 24 months. Now we're talking about big machines, big honking yellow machines, okay? So they're talking about these machines, and they're like, wait a minute, we can't do that. We don't even know. And we're like, well, we've got to hit the date. We got to lock down requirements so we can hit the date, right? I felt like the PMO Hulk, right? Lock requirements, hit date, lock requirements. I mean, that's all I knew. And so we were trying to do this, right? And our customers kept pushing back. And so eventually, I mean, we got through the program, we delivered stuff, we made our customers mad, but at the same time, we made the delivery, we hit the manufacturing date. Then after that, long story short, I moved from the heavy manufacturing world, I went to the digital world. And as a matter of fact, the digital part of the company that I went to was actually the analytics and innovation. So now I'm working with a bunch of data scientists. Now, these data scientists, they're running experiments, okay? And so now I'm doing my PMO Hulk thing, right? Lock requirements, hit the date. Lock requirements, hit the date. I'm doing this to all these data scientists, and these data scientists, they have these super graduate degrees. Matter of fact, I had to lead one project. The guy who asked me to lead the project, he was a professor at the #3 ranked university in the country. And we had 5 people with master's degrees. We had 3 people with PhDs, and one guy had 2 PhDs. And I have ADD. So I'm going around these data scientists and I'm like, hey, lock requirements, hit the date. They're like, we're running experiments. I said, so? They're like, we don't even know what the requirement is. All I have is a hypothesis. And I'm like, a hypo what? I'm like, what is that, a disease? I couldn't even spell the thing. And so I began to realize that, locking requirements, trying to ask people to lock requirements when your scope is really fuzzy, when there's a lot of ambiguity, you have a lot of uncertainty, that wasn't working. And my whole paradigm, everything that I knew about project management kind of went out the window. I'm like, wait a minute, what's going on here? And what we had to do is, I had to start realizing this thing called Agile, because instead of design, build, and test, basically what they did is they had a hypothesis, and what they were doing is they were running experiments, they were designing, building, testing experiments, they were testing out their hypothesis. And every couple of weeks, based upon what they delivered, they would make adjustments, and they would refine the hypothesis or what have you, and they would make adjustments, and they would start going. And see, the thing is, we had to have these fast integrated learning cycles. Agile is all about having fast integrated learning cycles, and then we had to be able to pivot. See, I call these built-in pivot points. The thing is, Waterfall works great if you really have a pretty good idea of what the scope is, right? Waterfall works great that way. But if the scope is undefined or if it's unclear, then we have to do something a little different. Matter of fact, in the 13th annual State of Agile report by version 1, they said the number one benefit of adopting Agile is being able to handle changing priorities. Being able to handle changing priorities. So, I'm one of the few people that actually know how to do Agile in my company, and so here's me, and I started running around the company a little bit, and I launched a couple Agile teams, or there were maybe a couple Agile teams there, and I'm working, and okay, things are going well, and then more and more people want to know about Agile, and all of a sudden, there's like more teams. I'm helping more teams, I'm launching more teams, and now I'm helping a lot of people all over the organization. Right? I went from being this guy who's trying to force data scientists to lock requirements on experiments. Now I'm like, I started a couple Agile teams, and now people heard about it, and now all these people are constantly calling me. The thing that was amazing in that panel session we just came from, see, I actually won an award because I had a PMO team where I was the only one in the company that we had project managers, traditional project managers, we had PAs, and we had Scrum Masters. And I even had quote-unquote Agile program managers and things like that. I was the only one in the company that had that. Actually won a Leadership in Action award from that. And so here I am. I'm working as hard as I can. I'm trying to work, and where'd my icon go? There we go. And I'm working through this, and I'm getting more and more teams Agile, and I'm doing the best that I can, and I'm talking to people literally from Europe, from China, from India, all over the U.S. I'm working from 4 in the morning till night. I'm working on Saturdays and Sundays and things like that. And we did some good things, and some of the team that I was working with, the Agile transformation team that I was working with, we did some really good things. But the problem is, it was like I could launch a team, and I can get the team doing a little bit better, and they would reach kind of a plateau, and then it was like really hard to get them even better. And I kept trying to work with all these teams, and I kept trying to get them better and do the retrospectives better, sprint planning, all this stuff, work with the tool better. I kept trying to do all these things, and I kept, we would plateau, and I kept bumping my head, and I kept wondering why are we hitting this plateau? Well, one of the things that Agile does, and it does very well, is that it really shows a lot of organizational problems. So, a lot of people think that, when you go through this Agile transformation, like I mentioned, you hit the switch, you snap your fingers, and all of a sudden the organization's Agile, and all of a sudden your productivity is going through the roof. You will see some benefits, and things will get better. But really what ends up happening is, and at least my experience, is that when you start doing all this stuff with Agile, you start realizing there are a lot of problems going on in an organization. How many can attest to that? Okay, please don't name any names. All right. So we go through this, and we start seeing all these organizational problems. We start seeing all this bureaucracy. We start seeing all these inefficiencies and all this stuff going on here. And one of the biggest inefficiencies, there was an article in the Harvard Business Review, and it says this: in today's fast-paced, fiercely competitive world of commercial new product development, speed and flexibility are essential. Companies are realizing that the old sequential approach to developing new products simply won't get the job done. All right, who heard me speak at the luncheon last year? Little by little, doing big things with Agile. Okay, I only have one person that came back. I'm sorry to hear that. Anyway, okay, so you can't answer this. All right, so notice this. The article says, in today's fast-paced, fiercely competitive world. All right, anyone want to take a guess when this was written? Anyone want to take a guess? 10, 20 years ago? Okay. Well, let me give you a hint. The #1 song during this time was Lionel Richie's Say you, say me. The #1 movie in 1986 was the original Top Gun. Okay, I know they just re-released one, but it's the original Top Gun. So what are you getting at? Well, this article was written over 3 decades ago. This article was written 33 years ago, and it's saying, in today's fast-paced, fiercely competitive world, okay, the sequential approach to development simply just, it's not going to work. Well, what do you mean? Well, Gary Hamel, by the way, Gary Hamel, if you haven't read him, I highly suggest you read him. The Wall Street Journal says that he is the world's most influential business thinker. Fortune magazine describes him as the world's leading expert on business strategy. He's written 17 articles for the Harvard Business Review. He's the most reprinted author. And he says this: in fact, the foundations of modern management were led by people like Daniel McCollum, Frederick Taylor, and Henry Ford, all of whom were born before the end of the American Civil War in 1865. A lot of traditional organizational structures were designed for things that were happening centuries ago, a century ago. Well, what do you mean? The Industrial Revolution came, and a lot of our management practices, all these people that you read about, if you go to school, a lot of these management principles are still there. All these principles, all these methodologies, or what have you, they were created for this really heavy manufacturing world. Okay? Today is a little bit different. See, and the thing is, in a manufacturing world, functional silos make sense. I think earlier in the session we talked about silos. I think it was in Mark's session this morning. We were talking about silos. How many work in an organization that have traditional silos? A lot of us. Okay. Now, my experience with two major companies like this is how communication works in organizational silos. Wait for it. Wait for it. Okay, these are the 5 approvals that have to go here. Then here are the 6 approvals that go there. And then here are the other approvals that got to go to the last chain, right? And of course, that's not enough. What ends up happening, you got to verify all those approvals, right? You got to have, see, here's the thing that I've recognized. You know, when I go into organizations and I work with all these different departments, here's the thing. The more manual steps you have in an organization, guess what? The more manual verification steps you have. Why? Because people miss things and things happen. See, organizational functional silos, they're made for communication going this way. And I would argue some cases, they're not, it doesn't even do that well this way, right? When you have to cross functional silos, right? When you try to cross functions, when you try to cross these silos, this is how communication gets. And then we run into things like over budget, over time, we're not delivering stuff, et cetera, and then all of a sudden, we have to play the blame game, right? And then each department is trying to figure out where the problem is, and each department's yelling at each other, and we're not getting anything done. That's what happens in functional silos, and that's what happens in these traditional management systems. So what do we got to do? Well, what we need to do is we've got to be able to organize around value. See, what we want to do is we want to understand not just how these functional silos work, we want to understand how value, everyone look at your neighbor, say value. Okay, how value flows through an organization from concept to cash. In other words, from the time that somebody has an idea or we get an order until the time that we can actually ring the cash register, we have to understand value. So, and then we've got to understand that the way value flows through an organization, it's really iterative, right? It's cyclical. Well, what do you mean? Well, let's say we have this value stream, that's what we call this. We have this value stream, and we see our return, and then we say, you know what, that's maybe not the best return we want, so we're going to have to go back to concept, and it's a very iterative thing, okay? Now, if you have a very traditional organization, if you have really old, antiquated management practices, if we have these kind of things, this is a very long process, like we just talked about. This is very difficult, this is very long. So what we've got to do is we've got to make this feedback loop as efficient and simple as possible, so that we can cut down and we can go to time, we can get things time to market and stuff like that. There are companies out there now that are pushing code to production every 30 seconds, every minute, things like that. Unbelievable. It used to take 6 months, a year, 18 months, whatever it is. People are pushing stuff out in seconds, in minutes. So we've got to be able to look at an organization, and we've got to be able to have this efficient flow of value. So our key takeaway number 1: organize around value. Organize around value, okay? Why? Number one, it eliminates or reduces dependencies. It eliminates or reduces dependencies. It drastically reduces durations from months and weeks, even to days, or possibly hours, all right? So, first thing, we've got to organize around value. Now, I did something like this. I was working with a group, and they were super busy. It was unbelievable how busy they were, and they kept getting request after request after request, and they had to get all this work done. They had all this work they had to get done, and I was looking at them, and they're like, Neil, you've got to help us. We want to go Agile, et cetera, et cetera. I said, okay, tell me what's going on. And they showed me what they were doing, and basically, like this is a very simple illustration here of how they were working. They actually, where did I add it? Yeah, there we go. They had they had like an 18 or 20 step process to get a project done. 18 to 20 steps, and I don't mean activities, I mean like steps and departments and things and validations and verification, all this stuff that they had to do. And so what we did was, when we did a value stream mapping, or we kind of identified their value stream, and we said, okay, you know, if we can get these cross-functional teams going here, what ended up happening is literally, they were things that would take them 6 weeks. Oh, my group over here, give me the lock requirements. Come on, lock requirements.
Lock requirements.
They called it a brief, right? They called it a brief, like a business brief or something. That brief was 20 or 30 pages long, and it was like this much of fine print. That's not brief, okay? That's not brief. And so what they ended up doing was, they put the people who were locking the requirements or writing the requirements with the people who were actually doing the work, and they actually sat them down together, and they would just like talk to each other. It was amazing. Matter of fact, the first time they called me, they were like, hey Neil, we need you to come. We're way behind in this project. We need some help. I said, okay. Actually, they said, hey, there's a critical project. We really need some help with this. I said, okay. And I thought I was going from the beginning of a project to the end. They're like, no, we're halfway through. We're like 60% of the way through, and we only got a few weeks to get this done. I said, okay, give me everybody in a building. Give me everybody together in one day, and we will get some things done. So can you turn your chair? You're Bert?
Yes.
Okay, and you're Tom. Okay, so here's the deal. All right, they were working, this is a project. They actually, the third party that they were working with didn't work out, so they had to bring a brand new third party that the company had never worked with before. Okay, so brand new third party they've never worked with. See, I see, tell me your name back there.
Debbie.
What's that?
Debbie.
Debbie went like this. Right, and that's about what it was. Okay, so you know what I did? I had them come together, right? Can you turn your chair? Can you turn your chair? So I come in, right, and they didn't ask. The way they set it up is they literally set it up like, okay, the third party's over here, we're over here, right? So what I did was I had them come like this, and they started talking together. Shake hands. Just say, introduce yourself. What's your name?
Bert.
Bert, Tom, right? And so I had them sit together, and they started talking together, and they started working together. It was like speed dating, right? So they started talking to each other, and they started working together, and it was like what they used to take weeks to do, they got done in a couple hours. Why? Because the people who were coming up with those requirements were talking to the people who were going to execute on this thing, and it was the first time they were like, oh my gosh, this is magic. Yeah, get two people to talk together, magic, right? Eliminate all those steps, get them together. I mean, they had step after step. I talked about a 20-step process. That was at a high level. If you really got into the details of all those steps, I mean, this thing was so complicated. And even the lady who created it, she said, man, this thing is bloated. I said, no, this thing is like way over, this is obese, not bloated. It was ridiculous. But when I got the people together and they started talking, they got things done in weeks. Thank you very much. And what they ended up doing was they got that project done, and then they launched another pilot team, and they're doing things so quickly and so efficiently. They're amazed at how fast things can happen. Well, what do you mean? If you organize around value and you create cross-functional teams, it's amazing how fast things can happen. All right, so that's the first step. Organize around value. Okay, there we go. So, by the way, I think in 2000, there's an article in the Harvard Business Review that states that 52% of the companies since the year 2000 have either gone bankrupt, they've been acquired, or they no longer they have ceased to exist. 52% of the companies that were out there that many of us grew up knowing, 52% of those companies, they're gone. And if you go on and read this article, the reason why is because they said it's because of this digital disruption. How many know, regardless of what your company is, that company has to be a digital company? Well, what do you mean? Well, for example, Uber is the #1 transportation service in the world. They don't own one car. What do they own? A user interface, an app that gets on your phone, right, that you hit, and all of a sudden a car shows up in 5 to 10 minutes. Okay, technically they're a transportation company, right? But they have mastered that user interface, they have mastered digital. You know, Amazon is a retail company, right? What have they done? Just hit a button, bam. Okay? Whether you're a finance company, a manufacturing company, it doesn't matter what company you're in, our digital strategy has to be there. Our digital strategy has to be there. And if we do these things if we have an organization that's set up from principles from hundreds of years ago, we're not gonna be able to survive in this digital company. But if we do this, have these long-lived cross-functional teams that are organized around value, that's how we get faster to market. That's how we're able to move quickly. All right, so I'm going to pause real quick. Everyone take a deep breath. All right, any questions? Yes, sir. It's Jason.
How do you get these functional teams to work together without blaming each other for failures of the team?
I feel like half the time my job is really as a counselor, like a family counselor rather than a coach. So there's another part of the answer I'm going to talk about later. I'm going to give you an example. I was talking to a product, they asked me to help with a team that was going off the rails, and so I started talking to these people, and I was talking to the product owner. I said, hey, you know what, I'm going to go visit the tech guys. They're like, okay, hey, let me go with you. I said, okay. So we went up one flight of stairs. The guy's looking around like this. And I'm looking at him, what are you looking around for? He's like, oh, I've never been up here. I'm like, you guys have been working together for 18 months, you're one floor away, and you don't even know where these people sit? Okay, that's the problem, right? So the more we can kind of build that trust. When I speak at the BNY Global Conference, I have this session called the IT Factor for Scrum Masters and Project Managers, and I talk about how important it is for the project managers to be able to be those facilitators to work on those kind of conversations. And I'll talk about, there's a second part to that which I'll address here in a second. Any other questions? That's a good one. No? Going once? Going twice? Okay, we're gonna go. All right, so section 2. All right. I was talking to a director one time, and she literally told me, we're 160% over capacity. And I thought, that's not a good thing, right? They said, yeah, 2 of our VPs sat down, and we already had 100 and something projects, and now they want to bring on 60 others. They're like, hey, can you help us? I was like, yeah, sure. Okay, so here's the problem. In most companies, we have competing priorities. Right? We have competing priorities, and here's the thing, because we're in these functional silos, what ends up happening is, VP or director or whoever is over this silo, they've got much different metrics, and they've got much different performance goals to hit than these people, right? So, Jason asked the question, well, how do you get these 2 people to start working together? Well, the hard thing is that they have competing priorities. One manager, they value this manager, they value this, but they've got to work together. It's going to be very difficult, right? Here's another way of prioritization. What was his name, Dave? The gentleman that did the thing this morning, Mark Kenny?
Are you talking about Kenny?
Yeah.
Mark?
Mark Kenny. So, he talked about the hippo, right? The hippo show, hippo prioritization. The highest paid person in the room gets to prioritize, right? I'll never forget, I was in a meeting and we went 57 minutes and all these different business units and everybody were all on the same page. We're like, yes, we are going to do this. And then all of a sudden the manager calls in, who is the highest salary person calls in at the 57th minute. Because I'm like, oh, I'm proud. I'm like, hey, 57 minutes, hey, get out of here. I'm giving you 3 minutes back. I was so proud I gave him 3 minutes back. All of a sudden the phone rings. I should have answered the phone, but the phone rings, we answer the phone, it's this real high-level manager, and within 3 minutes absolutely destroys everything that we just talked about. Right? Anyone know what I'm talking about? Okay, yeah, that's hippo prioritization, the highest paid person in the room, okay? Obviously not the most effective. Here's one that I really like. The squeaky wheel gets the grease. That's not the one that I like. This is the next one that I like. But the quacking duck gets shot. All right, what do you mean? The squeaky wheel gets the grease, but you got to be careful because if you squeak a little too much, you might get shut down, right? By the way, this is how my career went. You know, several years ago when I told you I was working with those data scientists, and I'm like, we really need to start getting into this Agile thing, because I was the first one working in the digital division. I'm like, I kept telling 3 levels of PMO management. I was telling my supervisor, I was telling the regional director, and I was telling the divisional manager that, hey, we've really got to get into this Agile thing. And they kept saying, I don't know if I want to get in the Agile business. And I kept telling all 3 levels, if you don't get into the Agile business, we may be out of business, all right? And I'm kind of glad I didn't listen to them. So anyway, point being is, when you have these dysfunctional ways of prioritizing, what ends up happening is, we have a lot of work in process. And we start focusing on utilization. And when we start focusing on utilization, this is what Nashville looks like right about this time, right? Right? Traffic is horrible, okay? You guys have bad traffic out here? I'm going to tell you something. No one has worse traffic than New York. New York is the worst place to go. I hate driving there. I don't know why anyone owns a car in New York. It took me, no kidding, it took me over 2 hours to get 17 miles, okay? And I thought that was after rush hour, okay? But what am I getting at? What I'm getting at is a lot of companies think a lot of activity and all this work in process is good. A lot of managers think, hey, this is good. We're 120, we got heat maps that are like flaming red, okay? Here's the thing, Don Reinertson, he's probably the foremost expert when it comes to lean product development. He says, we will always conclude that operating near full utilization is an economic disaster. Look at your neighbor, say disaster. Disaster. What do you mean? If you have this much economic utilization, if you have this much utilization work in process, what happens if an ambulance tries to get through here? It can't, right? So what do you mean? So if a company has all this utilization, and then all of a sudden there's a strategic thing that comes down and says, hey, we need to really start developing this, and all your resources are already 120% allocated, what happens? Something's going to break, right? What's the answer? Well, just get her done. Get her done. Just get her done. People are going to work 16-hour days. They're going to work Friday. They're going to work Saturday, right? Okay, just for those of you that don't know, if you're working in the digital realm, that's not going to work. Why? Because if you've got data scientists is the number one job, is the number one most sought after job now, according to LinkedIn. If you get developers and people like that, those are very high demand jobs. If people are working 15 to 16 hours a week and they're working Saturdays and Sundays, guess what? They're not going to stay. Right? And then when you have this turnover, what happens is if you start having this turnover, it starts creating this vacuum and things get even worse and you back up even more. Okay? So here's the thing about work in process. We can't multitask. Not really, and guess what? Neither can anyone else. And by the way, this is from Psychology Today. Okay? This isn't some just guy on Facebook. Okay? Think of task switching as less like multitasking and more like juggling. You have a couple different balls in the air, but you're only really touching one at a time. You're only touching one at a time. I was talking with the director on this, and she's like, we're 160% over allocated. I said, okay, reduce their work in process. They're like, we're going to get all this done. I said, look, I don't care if you're 500% over allocated. All right? You can only really work on one thing at a time. Here's the thing. I told you guys I was a martial artist, right? We have 3 things that happen to us when we're faced with a threat. We have flight or fight, and the third thing that I like to say, freeze. Okay? Fight, flight, or freeze. I already talked about flight. People can just leave. You can do this fight where people can, they may not fight like overtly, but they may fight with their, just not willing to do as much. And then number 3, they can freeze. I was talking to a person, she was a designer, she worked on design, and she's like, I had all this work and I would just look at all this work and I couldn't even think. Okay, they want to get things done fast and you got 500 things. How many of us got some projects at home that we know we need to work on? Right? And how many, because it's so big and it's so massive and it's so ugly, we don't want to work on it? Right? Regardless if you're 500% over allocated, 160%, whatever, you've got to start with something and start getting that, working on that, and then get that out the door. If we keep working process up and we keep trying to allocate 20% of this person here, 30%, that doesn't work well. We only touch one thing at a time, right? So what are you talking about? So my key takeaway number 2, strategic prioritization. Strategic prioritization. We've got to work so we can do the highest priority things first. Because here's the thing, how many know if everything is a high priority, guess what? Nothing is a priority. Because if everything is high priority, you got an Excel spreadsheet with font this big, right? It's just, I mean, it's like watching The Matrix when all that stuff came out. I know I'm dating myself. They're rebooting The Matrix, by the way. So at any rate, it's just another number. It's just another piece of work, right? And if you've got all this work to do, what happens to quality if people are overworked and they've got 500 things to work on? Quality goes out the window. So the best example of strategic prioritization is this. In 1997, Apple lost over $1 billion. $1 billion. So you know what Steve Jobs said? We're going to cut 70% of the work that we're doing. Now, how counterintuitive is that? You have a CEO of this major company, they lost $1 billion. Normally you would think, okay, we got to work more, we got to do more things, we got to do, right? He cut 70%, 70% of their products. He reduced the number of products by 70%. And he said this, Apple was to produce only 4 products, 1 desktop, okay, 1 portable device, and it was aimed at both consumers and professionals. 4 products. 4 products. Well, I think we know how the story ends up, right? The job of his team members was to focus on building 4 great products. All others would be canceled. Canceled. Well, we know that Apple is the number 3 in the Fortune 500. They're the number 3 ranked company, right, in the Fortune 500. And I think this quote is powerful. Deciding what not to do is as important as deciding what to do. Well, Neil, how do you get these people, how do you get these executives to prioritize? Well, Don Reinaldson, again, he's the foremost expert on lean product development. He says, if you only quantify one thing, quantify the cost of delay. Quantify the cost of delay. I was having a conversation a little bit ago. Tell me your names again, I'm sorry. I call you guys the sisters.
Sarah.
Sarah and Caitlin, that's right. Sarah and Caitlin. We were talking about data-driven analytics and things, data-driven marketing. And here's the thing. We've got to be able to quantify the cost of delay. What do you mean? Well, if we don't work on this, what is the cost? What is the impact, right? And the thing is, if we look at return on investment, that's a lagging measure. That's way, way down the line. We've got to come up with some innovation accounting measures and things like that. And by the way, a lot of this stuff, well, I'll talk about that book here in a second, but if we only quantify one thing, quantify the cost of delay. If we don't work on this, what happens? Standish did a study years ago, and they found out that most people, or when products are released, only 40% of the features are actually used. Right? They've actually done some studies that show a little bit less than that, but basically, the one study that most people are familiar with. When people build products, and here's the thing, when you get these big upfront design, or you get all these requirements, these 300-page spec docs, the customer's not going to use most of them. How many of us use Excel? Right? Almost everybody. How many knows every piece of functionality on Excel? Anybody? I know some people who are really good with Excel, and they still don't know half the functionality in there. Right? So what are you getting at? Well, if we're trying to release all this stuff and 60% of it's not going to be used by the customer, why are we working on it? Why not release the stuff that's the highest priority first, let them use that, and then we can add to it, right? Because, I've got an iPhone, and people are making fun of me because this is an iPhone 8. A couple of years ago, that was like the thing, right? Well, okay, now the iPhone, I don't even know what they're on now. Is it the 10X or I don't know what it is. But my point, see, they're clapping for me, thank you. Point being is, imagine if Steve Jobs didn't release anything until like now. How many phones would have not been paid for? How many phones would have not been used? How much money would Apple have lost if they would have waited 10 years to release something, right? What we want to do is we want to say, what if we don't do? What if we don't do this? What's going to be the impact? Okay, why don't we work on these things that are the most important, and then these things that maybe aren't as important, let's kind of put those to the side. See, the thing is, we want to have enterprise lean portfolio, all right? We want to have a lean portfolio. What do you mean lean portfolio? When we talked about portfolio management, there's a different way of doing portfolio management, okay? And you see this word Kanban. A lot of people think Kanban is at the team level. We want to have a Kanban at the enterprise level. And what we want to do is, first of all, we want to have these long-lived cross-functional teams, okay? We want to have these long-lived cross-functional teams. And then what we want to do is we want to be able to feed these teams. Well, how are we going to feed these teams? Well, we want to have initiatives that align to strategic themes, right? We want to win more millennials, okay? We want to really get into this market. We want to get into the digital age. Whatever that strategic theme is, we want to have initiatives that align to those, and then we want to be able to feed these long-lived teams. Now, typically in portfolio management, it does deal with strategic initiatives and things like that, budgets, all that kind of stuff. But the thing is here, the difference is, a lot of times it's kind of project-based, right? So here's our initiative, here's our cost, and these are the bodies. We're going to bring the bodies to the work. Here, we have long-lived teams. The bodies are here. Now what you're doing is you're taking these strategic initiatives, you're putting it in an enterprise portfolio Kanban, and now you're feeding the teams in a very lean way. All right, you don't have cost center budgeting, and you're not trying to fight, well, this resource is 30% allocated here, the 50% allocated. None of that. We've got long-lived, dedicated, cross-functional teams, and now what we're going to do is we are going to bring the work to the people. Think of this, right, regardless of whatever your product is, all right, whether it's a digital product or what have you, think of this is kind of like a production line, okay, a cross-functional production line, and then think of this as the work that you're bringing to the production line. That's kind of what this is like a backlog at an enterprise level. We normally think of backlog at a team level. We want this at an enterprise level. And the reason, and then we want to have this feedback, okay? And here's the thing, like I mentioned, when we're working with the Kanban, we really are focusing on throughput through an organization, okay? I'm not talking about at a team, we're talking about throughput at an organization, and we want to use a Kanban. Why? Kanban, the principle is very simple. We want to visualize work. It's amazing when I go in and talk to leaders, they have an idea how work flows, but they really don't know how work actually flows or how value flows through the organization. We want to limit WIP. We just talked about how difficult WIP is. And then we want to manage flow. We want that organization, we want value to flow through that organization very efficiently, right? And so, we've got work in process utilization, and then we've got throughput over here. All right, so, in other words, what we want to do is, again, the biggest thing you want to take away from this is that we want organizations to be able to see the work in process, or we want them to visualize the work. We want to create an ability for value to flow through there. Okay? Now, I'm just introducing this. This is a 3-day class that I teach on lean portfolio management. All right, so this is just very high-level overview. All right, because again, if we focus on utilization, this is what we get. If we focus on throughput and value flowing through an organization, this is what we get. All right. Any questions about that? You guys got that? I got 6 minutes?
15.
15, all right, thank you. All right, so first thing is around organizing around value. Second thing is having a lean portfolio Kanban. All right, so number 3, in that same version 1 State of Agile report, our number 1 on the top tips for successful scaling Agiles, internal Agile coaches. The number 1 tip is internal Agile coaching. What do you mean? Key takeaway number 3, we want to create a lean Agile center of excellence. We want to create a lean Agile center of excellence. Well, what do? Well, it's simple. They communicate the business need, the urgency, and the vision for change. In other words, these are the people that say, hey, look, we can really help you do this. We can help your organization, we can help the department, we can help the company, we can help the enterprise do this, and they create an urgency about it. They provide coaching and training, and they develop a lean, agile implementation plan. They help you through that transformation, okay? Now, what kind of people do you need for that? Number 1, you want some people who are very passionate. You want people who are energetic. You want people who are very passionate about this thing and want to see work change, and they want to see an organization transform, right? You want people who are willing to learn, as I mentioned in the beginning. Things are constantly evolving. You want people who are going to learn. Because I'll be honest, Agile transformation, a lot of times, you're just testing and learning. You're saying, hey, these are some Agile principles. We're going to try this. You see how it works. And then based upon that, you make adjustments. Okay? And then you want some good communicators. You want some good communicators. So, to give you an example, when I was at Big Humongous Company 1, our Lean Agile Center of Excellence was just a few volunteers. All right? And if I can be honest, the manager of that company was a very good person, but they really didn't even want to be there. They didn't know what to do with her, so they just gave her this role. Hey, why don't you be in charge of Lean Agile Center of Excellence? We're not going to give you a staff, but you can come up with some volunteers. Okay? And our budget was so low, we barely had enough money to get popcorn for lunch and learns. Okay? I'm not kidding. All right, so now fast forward, I go to big, humongous company too. We've got 20 plus coaches, we've got FTEs, all right, plus consultants, third party. So we've got internal Agile coaches here, and we've got third party consultants, all right? Which company do you think is really taking their Agile transformation seriously? I'll give you a hint. All right? So what do you mean? See, the thing is that the organization was transforming so fast that even with this 20 plus number of coaches, I'm just one of many coaches in this organization, okay? Even with this many coaches, demand is, we're still behind. We still have people that are wanting to get coached. We still have more and more teams and long-lived teams that want to get coached and things like that. And we're still behind, and they're still getting. I mean, we're bringing 3 more coaches in as soon as I get back. Okay? Well, why? Well, that's going to bring us to our final section, section 4. This big, humongous company too. They're a financial company. Okay? And this company, I'm not kidding, they are over 100 years old. I think it's closer to 150 years old. Okay? They are 150 years old. But, just like every other company, they want to get caught up with the digital age. Well, how do they get caught up with the digital age? Well, they were really undergoing this Agile transformation, and they were really launching teams and things like that. And so you started having all these Agile teams. And the thing is, the amazing thing about this company is not only were they launching Agile teams, but like a lot of the supporting functions were starting to organize around the teams. Well, what do you mean? Well, instead of having those functional silos, we had these cross-functional teams, and then you had, like, for example, like the call center and some of these operational things, people who go and train the sales staff and all that. They started organically, or not organically, or kind of not so organically, started forming around the teams. What do you mean? Everything was centered around the people who were delivering value. Okay, so why is that important? Well, it allows this organization to move a lot faster. Why? Because leadership was involved. What do you mean? That brings us to our final takeaway. Executive sponsorship. Prosy, the change management people, they said active and visible sponsorship has been the #1 on the list of top contributors in all of Prosy's benchmarking reports since 1998. For the last 20-something years, they've said this, active and visible executive sponsorship has been #1 on the list. Though much has changed in the field of change management over the last 2 decades, the importance of the leader's role in change has remained constant. What are you getting at? See, the reason why we have 20 plus coaches, the reason why you see all those teams launching and you see the organization starting to form around the teams versus those traditional silos. Now again, when I say they're forming around the teams, I'm not talking about HR titles and who you report to and things like that change, but the way they function changed, all right? A lot of times when we talk about Agile transformation, long-lived teams and things like that, that's a virtual organization, okay? That doesn't necessarily mean, even though it's in a hierarchy, the way they function isn't like that. It's just more of an HR function, the hierarchy. So what ends up happening is that the much has changed, the importance of the leader's role has remained constant. When I gave you that example, and by the way, that example earlier was a non-IT example, when I saw how quickly and how happy all those people were when they were working, I realized, this quote really started coming to light to me. People are already doing their best. The problems are with the system. Only management can change the system. Only management can change the system. Okay. So, I know you're wondering, you're like, well, how do I get VPs involved? How do I get upper management involved? Anyone wondering that? Okay, I'm going to give you a tip that any one of you can use as soon as you walk out of this door. As soon as you get back to your desk, you can use this tip. And it's going to seem very simple, but it was very effective for me. Well, what do you mean? All right. So a lot of times Agile transformation is kind of a two-pronged approach, right? You might have some Agile teams down here, okay? They may or may not be organized around value. Right? But we know that we've really got to make changes up here. So what do? I call it a win book. Okay? A win book. Well, what do you mean? Well, hopefully we can come up with some leading indicators, and if you don't, that's okay. We want to have some key results, or some surveys, some testimonials, things like that. You want to keep track of your team's wins. Okay? You want to keep track of your team's wins. I know that sounds very simple. I know that sounds very academic, but I'm amazed at how many people do not do this. Matter of fact, they wanted me to work with a team that's been in existence for about 2 years, and they kept saying this team is bad, they're not doing this, they're not doing that, they're not, all this kind of stuff. I said, okay, great. I said, this team's the bad stepchild. Okay, here's my first question. What does the customer think of this team? I've asked people, up to the VP level, I said, what do the customers think of this team? I don't know. And I talked to the business owner, who's responsible for this team, and she's like, oh yeah, the customers like it. I said, really? Where's your evidence? Where's your proof? She said, well, it was mainly anecdotal. I said, here's the first thing you do. Every time you have a sprint review, keep track of the feedback. Keep track of all the positive comments. What I used to do is when I would be in the sprint review and I would hear some things, I would write it down. And if and not only would I write it down, I would go to the person, I'd say, hey, Tom, hey, I really appreciate your positive feedback. Would you mind if I quoted you and, I could share this with management and things like that? And usually they're really happy about that, okay? They're like, oh yeah, sure. Hey, put down that, put this down, all that kind of stuff. And so I started doing this for a group that I was helping. Their whole department was transforming, and the amazing thing was this. We got into a meeting with all the upper management, okay? Upper management and lower management, or middle management. And so they were all complaining about this Agile transformation. They're all complaining about it. They're like, oh, we don't know what's happening, this, that, the other. They're complaining about all the painful things. Really what was happening is the middle managers, they didn't feel as much control with their resources as they used to. Anyone know what I'm talking about? Right? And so they were all going, and this was a bloodbath. They were just going on and on about how horrible Agile was, and this wasn't going right, that wasn't going right. Their people are confused, this, that, and the other. And so finally, I just raised my hand. I said, excuse me, who's he? Why is he talking? I said, hey, you know what? I know it's been painful. I know it's been really difficult. But, our customers, our business partners, they're sharing some really good things. Because, at the sprint reviews, here's some of the feedback, and I just kind of read some of it. And they got quiet. And all of a sudden, they started looking at each other. They said, one guy goes, hey, who besides Neil has been to a sprint review? Nobody raised their hand. So guess what happened at the next sprint review? Every single manager shows up. And you know what the customer said? Hey, we really appreciate everything that you're doing. And you know what? The flexibility you guys have it's just been helping us so much, man. Thank you so much. And by the way, that project, it was called Project CFO, Chief Financial Officer, because what they were doing is they were creating something for the CFO. Long story short, by having this win book, me sharing a couple items that I pulled out of the pages of that, we never had that conversation again. Did we have problems? Did we have some things we had to work through? Yes, but did we have the bloodbath that we did? No. Why? All because we have a win book. All right? I don't care what your background is or anything. I don't care if you put this on OneNote. I don't care if you put it on Word. I don't care if you put it on a napkin with crayon. All right? Use blue. Anyway, just have something down there. And every time your team has a sprint review, document that feedback, good and bad. And then, use that to, one, encourage the team. Here's the thing that I tell people, not only does it explain the value the team is bringing, but then when it comes to performance review time, guess what? You just look at the win book and they can start saying, hey, manager, this is what's happening. I worked on this, this, and this, and here's the output. Okay? Get a win book. And then hopefully, as you start delivering value, you start working up the chain and you start sharing this win book with middle management, upper management, and hopefully it gets up here, right? And it's a little bit harder when you have to go from the ground up, okay? It is harder, I can attest to that. But if you keep a win book, and if you start having a win book, and every team starts having a win book, and you start putting them together, now you have some real value add. Now you have some ammunition to go talk to leadership about changing some things. And you know what? Here's what we've delivered. If we change a few more things, we can deliver even more. Okay? Have some valuable evidence. Okay? Have a win book. All right. And then, of course, speak their language. When you go to, just a bit of advice from somebody who made this mistake, when you're trying to sell Agile to management or a high-level manager, things like that, don't talk about story points. Don't talk about stand-ups. You know why? Executives can care less. If you start talking about, well, we don't do this, we don't do things in durations and stuff like that, we use story points and that's going to confuse them even more. Don't do that. What you do? Speak their language. Speak value delivery. Look, we are helping customers. We are decreasing duration by 27%, whatever it is, whatever those metrics are that you guys have, whatever value that you guys are delivering, record that, then you start meeting with executives. They can care less how you're doing things, okay? What they want to know is about productivity. And see, the thing is, when you do these cross-functional teams, it's going to be a little difficult because a lot of people, it ends up being kind of a turf war. All right, but again, if you can get value and you can help people see value, then that makes that conversation a lot easier. There's a podcast by Mike Kodemeyer. Again, his name is Mike Kodemeyer. He calls it The Language of Gain. I highly recommend you get that. That is an awesome podcast. It's only like 20, 30 minutes, but he really talks about how when you're dealing with executives, speak their language. Like we talked about this morning, some of those exercises, understand their pain points. All right, so I'm going to wrap it up with this. The true measure of leadership is influence. Nothing more, nothing less. It just came from John Maxwell, okay? So, if you want to know how our roles are evolving, if you want to know how our roles can evolve, regardless of what position you are, be an influence. Be influential. It doesn't matter what your salary grade is. It doesn't matter what position you hold, where you are on the totem pole. How can you say that? Listen, when I first started in project management, I was at the bottom of the totem pole. My neck hurt from looking up so high to everybody. Okay, everybody I met with was a higher salary grade than me. Every team I worked with was a higher salary grade than I was. Okay, but I just kind of worked my way up, and I just kept working on things, and I really found this Agile thing, and I got really passionate about that. And again, I was probably at the right place at the right time because I was kind of a lower salary grade person, and I'm helping the entire organization transform to Agile. I was just talking to somebody who worked in the same organization, and they're like, were you a salary grade this? I said, no, I was actually one lower than that. She looked at me like, well, how are you doing that? I don't know. I was just very passionate about what I did, and people heard about me, and I just started, I'm all over the organization. And now I'm an organizational transformation consultant traveling around the country helping other organizations do that. Okay? So I'm trying to encourage people, don't worry about your position. Don't worry where you are. You can be an influence. You can be somebody that can bring change to your organization. All right? Okay, so with that said, all right, 4 things. Organize around value. Strategic prioritization. Create a lean, agile center of excellence. There's one thing you can do. Just start saying, hey, you guys want to get together, start talking about Agile? Great, yeah, okay. That's the easiest way to do that, okay? And then, executive sponsorship, okay? And if anyone would like to learn about Agile, I do teach some classes. If you want to get certified as a Scrum Master or other things like that, you can get 15 PDUs. I'll be teaching a class in November. Most of you have my card. If you want any information, let me know. Here's my contact information, okay? And finally, last but not least, thank you much, PMI Nashville. Thank you very much.